we're really lucky that Dawn is here. And so Dawn Furness is proposing and preparing, is working on a campaign to keep toilets single sex and to highlight what's happening and the importance of toilets. Where are you from, and what are your sort of credentials? What's your bio, Dawn?
My bio is that I dedicated a lot of my time, several years of my life, to the Green Party and activism, specifically around women's rights activism. So I was elected the regional, well, first of all, I was elected the local party coordinator, then I was elected the regional coordinator, then I was elected onto the national governance body, which is essentially the management director of the National Green Party. And I was also elected the co-chair of Green Party Women, which was initially supposed to be the the female representation caucus within the Green Party, and was subsequently taken over by people who were not supporting women's rights. And we had a definition that did not define who was actually part of the women's caucus within the parties. Therefore, we had males who were voting in the elections and who were voting for males who then became essentially the co-chairs of the women's caucus.
It's mad.
Which I find challenging, to be very blunt, and I think it's trying to not tar everyone within the organisation, because there are some incredibly hardworking people who are fighting for climate change, and yet there seems to be a very strident sense within the HQ and with senior management and some of the leadership that they are completely enthralled to this gender ideology, to the utter lack of any kind of protection and adherence to the Equality Act 2010 in the United Kingdom. This is a very short presentation about something that I think we can do very quickly with a very fast turnaround. This is a suggestion for doing 2 social media campaigns simultaneously. The first one is a campaign around World Toilet Day, which is next Saturday on the 19th of November. Next slide, please. So what is World Toilet Day? Now, this is an annual unofficial observance day by the United Nations. And initially it was established to raise awareness of the sanitation problems. 4.7 billion people have inadequate access to sanitation. And within that, sort of nearly a billion people don't have even sort of the most basic facilities. Now, what we're trying to do is to raise awareness of things that are happening in the United Kingdom. And in 2021, there was a national consultation that happened with the gov.uk, which is the government website, where there was held by the Women Inequalities Committees and also other governmental organisations to get feedback on the toilet provision in the United Kingdom. So lots of organisations, including Sex Matters, Fair Play, Green Party Women, put in consultations about recommendations. And the idea is to use this international campaign to raise awareness about very serious issues that are also happening to do with the erasure of single-sex facilities, not just in the UK, but globally, and to create a small mini campaign that can then be done effectively and rolled out within a very short space of time to raise awareness of this issue, to do it in quite a light-hearted way, despite the gravity and the severity of the issue, in order to try and get as much public and press coverage as possible. And then once we've got some roots into those sort of networks of our local press around the toilet campaign, then sort of step that up to have a follow-on campaign a week later talking about the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and to do something specific around that. So next slide, please. Now, within the consultation, as was then the Minister for Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, noticed these key points that were essentially coming back from the consultation, that gender neutral facilities massively discriminate against females because the toilet provision that is then adopted is taken away from the female provision, and women can use the cubicles, but men use both the cubicles and urinals. So in effect, what you're doing is reducing the availability of toilet provision for women. And not only is that, reducing the actual availability of services, but in doing so they realize that women have certain biological needs, including menstruation, including pregnancy, and including menopause, which means that they spend longer in the toilets. So anyone who's been to any sort of bar or restaurant or theatre and has come out at the interval will notice that the men's queue for the toilets is usually short, if at all, and the women's queues for the toilets are going around the block. And this is why this toilet provision sort of came in, the consultation came in. So also it was raised that women feel much more uncomfortable in using mixed sex facilities. And what has been happening is that organizations have been adopting gender neutral as this sort of progressive title to be seen as being organizations that are non-discriminatory, but in actual fact what they're doing is massively discriminating against women. Next slide, please. So what we're planning on doing is kind of a low-key but fun project around adopting a local toilet in your local community. So ideally, round about a week beforehand, so this is sort of moving forward from now, is find a local toilet that is in your area, that is publicly owned, that is not privately owned, i.e. it's not a shopping centre, it's sort of accessible to members of the public, it's not owned by a private organisation, and is essentially run by the local council. And check that it's open on a Saturday. Now, this is a suggestion: buy a cheap toilet seat or make one out of papier-mâché or cardboard, or create a large sort of poster board which has a cutout hole in the middle, similar to how we used to have the sort of saucy postcards in the United Kingdom in the 1950s and 60s. And in true Blue Peter fashion, here's one I made earlier. So this kind of thing where you have a large board with a hole cut out in the middle. And then you have printed hashtags of the campaign around the outside. This is obviously not finished, but then the idea you would put some colourful pictures around, or flowers, or just logos, or the feminist slogans, anything you want to do to sort of raise awareness. And then take photographs outside of the toilets on the day of the protest, where you are starting conversations with members of the public. And the idea that if also that there is a webinar that's happening next Friday evening with Helen Joyce and Maya Forstater through the Sex Matters platform, I think, that you can book online. And they also have just released a legal guidance on the sex toilets, the single sex service of toilet provision, and it's called Toilets Matter, a short guide to law and good practice. Now, using that as a quick reference guide, just to give people who are intending to participate in the campaign a bit more ammunition and a bit more information about what is the legal standing regarding single sex toilet provision under the law, and what the council is legally obliged to provide, so that if people do start asking questions about specific issues, then you have a bit more information. Now, on the day of the protest, turn up outside your adopted toilet with your banner and with your toilet seat, and take photographs, get involved in conversations, ask other people if they would like to be photographed with the toilet seat around their head, and use specific hashtags. So part of the campaign is to try and get interesting, fun photographs of local issues directly into the local press. Now, we can achieve that by drafting a template press release, or by sending a letter to the editor in your local press, identifying them in advance. And then on the day when you get these photographs, you can then send them to your newsroom. And sub-editors and editors like toilet humor, they like taking the piss, all these different kind of things that they can sort of do as fun headlines to then sort of promote the story. And if women are doing it nationally, then it then amplifies that messaging. So next slide, please. And the hashtags that we are using around this are the official hashtags of the World Toilet Day, but also Sex Matters and Toilets Matter. So that's the first one that's happening next Saturday on the 19th of November. Now, the next campaign, which is campaign 2, is tying into the the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Now, this is happening on Friday, the 25th of November, so 6 days after the first protest. And the next slide has more information about what this is. Now, essentially, this is an official day of observance by the United Nations, and They actually have, it's the start of 16 days of activism concluding on the 10th of December. Now, if anyone has been onto the website for the United Nations observance on this, the hashtags that they are planning on using are very obfuscating. It's, you know, they're using orange the world as a way to draw attention to orange being a positive color and about, hopeful about eliminating violence against women. And at no point does it mention men or male violence as being the cause of the violence that is seeking to be eliminated, which is frankly bullshit and needs to be called out. So the idea about this campaign is to call them out on their bullshit, where it's sort of holding account international organizations and NGOs like the United Nations for saying that they are effectively, supporting this fantastic campaign without actually naming the problem. So this is what we're going to do. Next Friday, the 25th of November, when this is actually the International, the Observance Day, this is something that you can do sitting at home on your Twitter keyboard, on your social media platforms. Every time that you see an organization or an NGO that is sharing this hashtag or sharing content or comments on the International Day of Elimination of Violence Against Women, you're just going to retweet it, or you're going to comment with male violence, name the problem, male violence against women. With these hashtags as a way to amplify that we are not holding accountable the actual people who are causing the violence in the first place. Now, this is something that you can do at home. It can be done, throughout the day. It can even be done following the day, because obviously this is 10 days of activism, 16 days of activism concluding on the 10th of December. Now, the next slide has a summary of the hashtags that we'll be using. And we'll also, in the intervening period between now and this going live on the 25th, creating some memes that we can share under WDI, which will allow people to visual representation with also quotes and statistics and about the use of passive language. And this is a huge problem in describing the problem, because you can't come up with a solution unless you can actually name the problem. So that is what the campaign is about. So it's trying to raise awareness, hold accountability, and also to hopefully embarrass all these organizations who are doing this, thinking they're virtue signaling by sharing this particular hashtag and saying, well, look, if you're not going to, you or no one else is going to identify the problem, then we will.